Today, I'm going to be ranking every new Nintendo Switch game I have played in 2023 so far. And I'd say we've got a pretty varied list. There's some AAA titles, a lot of indie games, and a mixture between cozy and not cozy. And we're going to be using the same ranking system I use for all of these types of videos, with F tier being a game I can categorically not recommend, and S tier being a game which to me is almost perfect. Essentially, it's a game where I love everything and there's no big buts to me recommending it. And I'm also going to be taking in factors like whether the game is buggy or not, and also whether it's good value for money. But before we get into the rankings, I just want to thank today's sponsor, Surfshark. Surfshark VPN is not only a way to keep you safe online, it's also a way to switch out which location your device is from, allowing you to travel to any country around the globe. It's super useful for someone like me who wants to watch certain stuff on Netflix, but it being locked to America only, so I can just change my location and go watch some of my favorite TV shows that way. And for those of you who like to play games online, it also stops your ISP from throttling your data, meaning that you can download or play games with the speeds you actually paid for from your internet provider. But it's also useful for keeping your personal data safe, either from big companies or from cyber criminals, as it encrypts all the information being sent between your device and the internet. This is super useful for when you're using things like public Wi-Fi where you don't actually know how safe it is. And Surfshark gives you total privacy and protection online. And if you use my code down below, you can get 3 extra months for free on Surfshark, and they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee if you don't enjoy the product, so this is a risk-free trial. Okay, it's time to do the rankings. We're going to start off with Mineko's Night Market. Now, this is really hard because the game itself I really do enjoy. But as of right now, the game has had 0 bug patches, and it's safe to say it's not running very well. And by not running very well, I mean the load times between scenes are extremely long. The game's been stuttering a lot, and I've heard this from other people as I actually gave up playing it on the Nintendo Switch and ended up playing it on my Steam Deck instead. But apparently there's a game-breaking glitch near the end of the game that means that you can't even carry on and finish it. But putting those issues aside, Mineko's Night Market probably has some of the best writing of any of the games on this list. It's so witty, it's so funny, it's also unbelievably wholesome, and some of the mini games you get to play are just so much fun. This game has a ton of potential when they do fix it. It's just a shame it launched in such a state, because I think a lot of these negativities have kind of outweighed the positive ones. So for now, I'm going to put it in C tier, but just know when they end up fixing all of these problems, if they can, which I think they will be able to, it will probably be B tier, if not A tier. I really did enjoy it. The one thing I didn't expect though is it's a little bit more grindy than I maybe expected it to be. A lot of the things in the game revolve around you earning money, which is surprisingly difficult to do outside of the night market. So I often found myself kind of skipping through or basically just stockpiling as many things as I could craft as possible for the night market and only then being able to progress in the game. But as I said, great game, just let down massively with the state it's released in. We're going from a game I enjoyed to a game I didn't enjoy. Don't ask me why I bought this. I can't actually remember why. No, actually I do remember why, because I heard it was an Animal Crossing ripoff. So let's talk about Pretty Princess Magical Garden Islands. This is categorically the worst game I have ever played. Did I laugh hysterically while playing it? Yes, I did. But that was mainly because some of the stuff in the game is such a blatant ripoff from Animal Crossing that I honestly don't know how they got away with it. Not only is the world identical, there's decoration items that are literally from Animal Crossing, but other than that, the gameplay itself isn't that similar to Animal Crossing. This is a very quest-based game versus what Animal Crossing was. There's also farm animals you can have as well. But one of the reasons I call this one of the worst games I've played, there is currently no Pro Controller support. And I'm fairly sure this game has only released on the Nintendo Switch. So for some reason you can use the Joy-Cons, but you can't then use a Pro Controller even though aren't they identical? It doesn't make any sense. The game itself is just awkward, slow. It's It's a mess, a funny mess, but a mess. But this is probably going to be one of the only F tier games on the list. And I stand by that. I will never put this game higher, okay? Look at it. Just look at it. Yeah, this game was a struggle. Going to a polar opposite game, we have Dave the Diver. Now, I know this isn't technically out on the Switch yet, but it's coming out later this month. But I have played an awful lot of this on the Steam Deck, so thought I would include it just to let you guys know how much I love it and why I'm definitely going to be buying it on the Switch. Now, you guys might not know this, but restaurant style games are one of my favorite genres. And outside of like mobile games, there doesn't seem to be a lot of restaurant management style games out there. So when I heard about Dave the Diver, I was very excited, but also very apprehensive because it's a roguelike. But thankfully, this has the best mesh between so many different genres I have ever seen. So you play as Dave, and each day you dive into the ocean with a harpoon and catch different fish, which you then go and sell as sushi at the restaurant later that day. The diving itself took me a little bit of getting used to on the controller. They picked some buttons that I'm not sure I would have necessarily picked to do each thing, but once you get the hang of it, it's actually a lot of fun and not too difficult. Well, until you start getting deeper into the ocean. So no two dives you have in the ocean are the same, and scattered around you can find different guns, different weapons that are often stronger than the default ones you start off the dive with. And then you can spend the money you earn from the restaurant to upgrade all your diving equipment, letting you go deeper, catch more fish, and also catch bigger fish as well. Now, I did enjoy the diving aspect, and I love the fact that you don't necessarily have to dive that deep into the ocean to get enough money to get your restaurant to work. So although there aren't any difficulty settings, you can kind of choose to not go too deep if you don't want to fight maybe the bigger fish. But the thing I really enjoyed was the restaurant side of things, as this gave everything such a purpose in the game. You control every aspect of the restaurant. First of all, you can decide the menu for that day based on the different types of fish you caught, either deciding to serve the fish up as is, or use some of the fish you caught to upgrade the dish so it can sell for more money. You're also in charge of decorating the restaurant, hiring staff, and then each day you're also a server at the restaurant as well. This was an awful lot of fun to do, and it gave the diving a purpose, as you could kind of figure out which dishes sell for a lot of money, which fish you want to prioritize catching. And later on in the game, they even introduced the ability to catch fish with a net rather than a harpoon, which gives you a higher grade of fish, allowing each dish to sell for more. But alongside all of this is also the story. Be this mer people that you come into contact with and end up helping out, be it the local conservation group that don't seem to be that focused on conservation and more focused on you, or the two little dolphins that always seem to get themselves in trouble and need help. Often you'll also get a food critic at your restaurant as well, and in order to impress them, you have to serve them really specific dishes that often require a lot of upgrading and a very specific dive location. But the thing Dave the Diver really excels at is the fact that it's constantly introducing new mechanics as you go, making sure this game never gets boring. So overall, it's a fantastic game. You'll get lots of hours of gameplay out of it, and the price is really decent. So I'm gonna go, yeah, we're gonna go S tier. I thoroughly enjoyed my time playing it, and I can't wait to get back into it. Alright, we have a late entry, which is the new Detective Pikachu game, as I've played a bit of it and I have a lot of thoughts. So for some background, because I think this does matter, I never actually played the first Detective Pikachu game. So everything I've learned about what this game is going to be came from the trailers which Nintendo showed us. I don't think Detective Pikachu is by any means bad. I just think the way they marketed it wasn't a good representation of the game itself. Now, from the trailers, I was expecting this game to have a fair amount of cutscenes and voice acting, and it turns out that's not really the case. Like, yes, it is a part of the game, but the majority of the dialogue is delivered just like every other Pokemon game, with lines on the screen. My other thing is, this is largely a game based at younger people, which I think makes it even more weird the fact that they decided to go through such a text-heavy route. The game will take you to different spots where something has transpired and you've been brought in as a detective to figure everything out. And it becomes up to you to go around, question everyone from people to Pokemon as Detective Pikachu can translate the Pokemon for you, and try and piece together what on earth has happened. And this is why I say I think this is made for a younger demographic, because it very much holds your hand through every single step of this detective work and basically hands you the answer. Also, for a game that relies so heavily on the visuals, it's not that visually impressive. For some reason, they went down the Scarlet and Violet route when it came to visuals, rather than the Pokemon Snap route, or even Let's Go, which both look incredible compared to this. So I wouldn't say this is a bad game, it's just not quite what I was expecting from the trailers and the way they portrayed it. Although I must admit, I had a good laugh at some of the moments in the game. But yeah, I feel slightly misled, so I'd say a solid C tier game, and maybe a better pick for a younger audience. Next up is Wildflowers. Now this technically didn't come out this year, but I did only play it this year, so I'm going to include it. Wildflowers is a farming sim like nothing I've played before. And the thing that really made this stand out was the story. I think far too often the story side of farming sims is often neglected. So it was really nice to see that Wildflowers put more of a priority on the character, the story, and the life sim elements, with the farming taking more of a back seat. Now, one of the reasons Wildflowers ended up being one of my absolute favorite games is just the voice acting. Quite often, I found it really hard to engage with characters in farming sims. I will rarely even make friends with people in farming sims. That's how indifferent I tend to be, let alone go down the relationship side. But giving these characters a voice and seeing how they react to each and every one of the big witchy events happening in the game really made these NPCs become alive, and they made me feel like they were real people. And not only did I end up doing a lot of the side quests for them, I made friends with most of the NPCs in the game. I even ended up dating a character as well, which is completely new to me and farming sims. The story is also beautiful. It touched home with me for so many different reasons. It's definitely an emotional story at times, but it's also unbelievably rewarding as you get to see the main character Tara really just come alive, and even after everything she's been through, not only found a new life, but found a better one on this island. It's going into A tier for me because it's just fantastic. There's just a few little things I wish the game had to make it slightly better, mainly with the farming sim mechanic side of things, although admittedly later on you can automate most of it. But I love it, it's great, one of my favorite farming sims. Definitely deserving of A tier. Next, let's talk about Storia Seasons A Wonderful Life. Now, this is a game I think I've changed my mind on, which is not something I do often, but I think at the time where I was enjoying it, there weren't a lot of fantastic farming sims out. So to me, this was the first farming sim in a while. It scratched that farming sim itch and I had a great time playing it. But now when I weigh it up against everything that's come out and coming out, it doesn't sit that high anymore. And I think that's mainly because the game's just really slow paced. I'm not someone who played the original, so there is no nostalgia factor for me whatsoever. And the way I see it from an outside perspective is I think they tried to stay so true to the original that they really limited what they could do with a fantastic idea. If you don't know, Storia Seasons A Wonderful Life really shakes up the farming sim genre by introducing time passing. Often when you play farming sims like Stardew Valley, you can play the game for 10 in-game years and nothing really changes. But in Storia Seasons, each time you finish a chapter, the game will jump forward a number of years. And although you get a cutscene each time jump about what your character has been up to in this time, in order to find out what all the other characters are up to, you need to run around the town and figure out what they've done with their lives and what's changed. And that to me was the best part of the entire game. I loved the time jumps, I loved seeing everything change and transform, and I thought that added such a fun element to the game where you would run around and see which characters coupled up, which characters are still single, whether anyone has had kids, seeing the kids of the town grow up as well. All of that was really cool alongside you coupling up, alongside you not only finding a partner, but also seeing your own child grow up with you as well. I think my main issue with Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life lay in the characters and their dialogue. It just wasn't strong enough to keep each season going. And although the seasons were only 10 days long, they still felt too long. Now, admittedly, the first year of the game is by far the worst. And as you get further through the game, more mechanics get added, like you can crossbreed plants and stuff like that. That keeps things a lot busier. But overall, I feel like the characters just needed to be stronger to keep this kind of thing going, especially considering how unbelievably awkward the farming sim mechanics are. So I'm going to put it in the B tier. I think C is a bit harsh. I still had a good time with it. And it wasn't really buggy. It ran fine on the Switch, which was nice. But I just think they could have done so much more with the premise. Next, let's talk The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. Now, admittedly, I am yet to find the time to finish it. And that's mainly because I got a solid amount of the way through and then didn't play it for like a month or two. And I tried to go back to it and I have no idea what I was doing or where I was. So I'm going to need to restart. But obviously, this is going to go in the S tier. It's not a perfect game, but it is an unbelievable one. Like, I truly do not understand how this runs on the Nintendo Switch. It doesn't make any sense. And honestly, I can't decide which was better, the game or seeing all the amazing TikToks of what people did with the Koroks. It was so cursed, but so good. If I'm being brutally honest, I think at first I was worried I didn't like the game. That first Sky Island part to me got me really worried that this game was not for me. I don't know why, I struggled with it, it felt slow, it felt almost boring, but as soon as I touched down on Hyrule, I had an absolutely fantastic time. There's just so much to do, but I felt overwhelmed in such a great way. And despite the shrines looking kind of cursed, if you know, you know, I found them a lot of fun, arguably more fun than I found the shrines in Breath of the Wild. I also really enjoyed exploring the map and finding all the Koroks on the way and helping those out. And as much as I love the story, I definitely think it was more enjoyable watching it in order. Because once I found out that little map that tells you the order of each of the tier locations, that made me appreciate the story more once I could enjoy it the way it was meant to be seen. But as good as Tears of the Kingdom is, if I'm being entirely honest, it didn't quite have the magic that Breath of the Wild had for me. And I can't really figure out why. I don't know whether it was the timing that Breath of the Wild was one of my first Switch games versus now when I have so many other games to play. Still S tier, but just not quite as S tier as Breath of the Wild was. Speaking of S tier games, I'm actually tempted to put Pikmin 4 in. You know what? It's going, because it's a game I didn't expect to enjoy as much as I did. I'm going to be entirely honest, I pre-ordered this for my parents. Pikmin is one of my dad's favorite franchises, and my mum really wanted the Pikmin keychain, so I ended up pre-ordering it for them. However, once I picked it up, I fell in love with it. I didn't think I was going to enjoy Pikmin because I thought I'd get emotionally attached to each of the Pikmin and then find it really stressful and not able to enjoy it. But actually, I was completely wrong. I didn't find it all that stressful, even when the Pikmin were passing away all around me. And I found the game and its gameplay mechanics really rewarding. I really enjoyed exploring each of the maps and being able to upgrade your equipment. It was a game that really surprised me. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but I do. My only issue is trying to get it away from my dad so I can play it more. Then we have Harvest Moon. I talked about this a lot in my last video, so I won't talk about it too much. It's a great game. I'm just not so sure about its current price point. Mainly because I'm really struggling with the exploration side of the game, because the map is massive, but you can't jump, and it's kind of making things a little bit tedious to kind of walk around every single tiny ledge, and I don't really understand this design choice, so I think I'm going to put it in the B tier. I've enjoyed it more than I think I did with Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life, but this game was also, with the DLC, substantially more expensive than Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life. I do love the story and the characters. I think the dialogue is well done. I just hate how tedious some elements of the exploration is. Also going in the A tier is Fae Farm. I know some of you might be shocked that I'm not putting it in the S tier, but as I said earlier, I believe the S tier is a tier where there is no buts. And Fae Farm has an absolutely massive but it's not a but I particularly care about. And the issue with Fae Farm is it's kind of ruined other farming sims for me. For me personally, I found the farming and the mining mechanics to be really well done. It was easy, it was smooth, and it's kind of made it hard to go back to previous farming sims that don't have such a streamlined approach. But the big but in Fae Farm is, despite the fact I love a lot of things, it does massively lack in terms of the story, the characters, and the events. You basically can get away with not reading any dialogue in the game whatsoever and have more or less the same experience. And marriage is completely pointless in Fae Farm. The person will live in your house, but that's about it. They don't contribute much else. So yeah, A tier because of the but I've had a fantastic time playing it. Speaking of butts, we have Paleo Pines. Now I'm going to put this in B tier. I'm going to start off by saying I thoroughly enjoyed this. This is a very, very stripped back farming sim. I think my main issue is I enjoy everything about this apart from the farming. Now, farming isn't a huge aspect. It's mainly used to either make money or to give snacks to your dinosaurs. But I've just found it, especially on a controller, to be unbelievably awkward. And it kind of made me not want to do the farming at all. Other than that, though, the thing I love the most about it is the dinosaurs. They are so cute. They are so much fun to ride around on. I want to collect all the rare ones because each dinosaur comes in a common, uncommon, and rare color type. So whenever I see a rare one, I want it instantly. The story is really wholesome. I love unlocking all the different areas, finding more dinosaurs. The only real setback is I think you're limited to 24 dinosaurs on your ranch, which is a shame because I think I want every single dinosaur. Now, I say this is stripped back because it's missing some aspects that other farming sims have. Like, as far as I know, there are no mines. There's no relationships that you can have either. But I think that's mainly because the dinosaurs are the big selling point. Now, this is perfect if you have young ones who want to get into this genre, as just running around and seeing cute dinosaurs is so much fun. Another late entry is Silent Hope, which I've recently just started playing, so I'm not far through, but just kind of wanted to mention my early thoughts. And despite being made by the makers of Story of Seasons, this is actually a dungeon crawler. The story is set in a kingdom where people began to deceive and backstab each other. So the king decided the best way to sort this out was to steal away your people's ability to speak, and he hurled himself into the abyss. As a result, his daughter, the princess, cried an endless flood of tears and encased herself in a giant crystal teardrop. Many years after this event, though, rays of hope appeared before the princess, manifesting themselves as 7 different heroes. And it's up to you to work your way to the bottom of the abyss to see what lies there. Each of these 7 heroes are different classes, ranging from magicians to hand-to-hand combat. And although these types of games aren't necessarily the ones I would gravitate towards, I've been having an awful lot of fun with this game. Now, it's important to note going into this that I find a lot of comfort in games with a repetitive pattern. Repetitive games are just my go-to whenever I'm feeling stressed or before bed. It's why I tend to gravitate towards farming and life sims. So this very much falls into that category. The way it works is you jump into the hole and you make your way through a floor by floor, clearing all the enemies as you go and picking up resources as well. And with each floor you go down into the abyss, it gets slightly harder. At certain points in some of the floors, you'll come across this teardrop shape. This gives you the option to either switch which fighter you use, or giving you the option to leave the abyss altogether. This is important as if you end up fainting in the mines rather than leaving on your own accord, you'll end up losing some of the loot you've gathered. And between dungeon runs, you can use everything you've gathered to go to each of these stations and make stuff to help you with your next journey. This can either allow you to make brand new weapons, or you can also make food that give you buffs to help you on your journey the next time you go to the dungeon. Now, considering Story of Seasons does not have the best combat or mining system whatsoever, I was very surprised at how buttery smooth I found the combat to be. The progression system gave you different skills you could learn, and further on you can pick subclasses and make some really overpowered builds. And with 7 different fighters, each with their own fighting styles, it was a lot of fun to chop and change between them whenever you wanted. The random loot system was also a lot of fun, with there being weapons and equipment at different rarities, so it was always exciting to get a super rare version of something. And although it was repetitive in a really fun way, as you were always working towards something, be it leveling up your character for a boss fight or trying to farm resources to get a really rare weapon. The main downside was actually, I never thought I'd say this, the voice acting. Because the princess, quite frankly, will not shut up. And despite the fact she was the only one that could talk, it felt very reminiscent of like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you know, the kind of barrage of noise that doesn't really do a lot. By the way, no hate, I love Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But yeah, this surprised me. I think I'm going to go B tier for now, but it could easily work its way up if I end up putting a lot more hours into it. I just naturally gravitate towards this style of gameplay, so I've been having a blast. Then we have the Cosmic Wheel of Sisterhood. I'm also going to be putting this in the A tier. It is a narrative style game that I've had an absolute blast with. It's all about a witch who has been kicked out by a coven and exiled on an asteroid for 1,000 years. And 200 years into her sentence, in order to not lose her mind and hopefully escape, she asks the help of a forbidden entity called a behemoth. And after a series of events means that you can have visitors to your cell, you start pulling strings and helping people out that determines the fate of your entire witch coven. The really unique part is how you make decisions in the game, because you are a fortune teller, so you can use tarot cards to tell people's fate. And the cool part is, not only do you get to make each of your cards, but you also influence the game with the cards in which you pull and how you interpret each of the cards, because the knowledge you impart on others about their future will determine their actions. I was hooked on the story from start to finish. There's 7 different endings, so there's a ton for you to do. I absolutely love it and think it's highly underrated. Next up is Bayonetta Origins, which I think I'm going to put in B tier. There's a lot of things to love about this, like the art style was incredible, I loved the story, the fact that it had voice acting, and I really loved the puzzle solving side of the game. However, my main issue is just the price. This is less than 10 hours of gameplay with not really much replayability, so the fact that it cost as much as it did kind of let it down. It also was a bit of a struggle at times for my small brain, as you had to control 2 characters at the same time, which made combat incredibly brain intensive, but it was a nice concept, just an overpriced one. Speaking of controlling 2 characters at the same time, we have Blanc. Now this is intended to be a 2-person game, and when you play it in that way, this is a beautiful puzzle-solving adventure following a baby fox and a fawn who are trying to find their parents. This is such a beautiful game. It ran fantastically on the Switch, and the puzzle solving was a lot of fun. The only issue is, it's significantly less fun by yourself. Now there is a single player mode, but it involves you controlling both characters at the same time. And again, that transformed the very chill experience into a very brain-intensive experience. So I think if I had someone else to play this with, it would be A tier, but by myself, B tier. Another A tier game for me is Oxenfree 2. This to me felt a lot scarier than the original Oxenfree, but I actually loved everything they added into this story. To me, the little walkie-talkie system just added a brand new element. The fact that you could chat with people that you're not immediately with really helped. And I also loved the fact that I couldn't always tell whether a decision I was making was a game-changing one. That really helped me feel better. Even though I'm not typically a scary games kind of gal, the way in which this is done made it tolerable for me, and in fact I really enjoyed it because it wasn't always creepy, but it definitely had creepy elements, and there were a few jump scares, but not enough to make me put it down. So yeah, really solid game. Fall of Porcupine, I'm going to put in the C tier, mainly because this had quite a few glitches on the Switch that kind of took away from my experience of it. And despite the fact that I really enjoyed it, sometimes I couldn't really understand where on earth the story was going. So although the tiny little elements of the story I was doing was a lot of fun, overarchingly, I couldn't tell the direction of it. One thing I loved about Fall of Porcupine is it told the story of the struggles of working in healthcare as of right now, and shows the toll this takes on healthcare workers when they are underfunded and understaffed. And you also got to experience some of the darker sides of working in healthcare. Like, for example, saying goodbye to a patient you loved and then immediately having to basically go back to doing your job as if nothing even happened. So much of this was done so well. I think if there was no glitches in the game, it would be B tier at least. Octopath Traveler 2 going in the A tier. I actually think I preferred this to Octopath Traveler. I think the stories were much better than the first one. I do like the fact that they intertwined each of the 8 stories just a little bit more. This is also a stunning game, one of my favorite RPGs of all time. And I really hope they carry on with this series. I just, again, would like more intertwining between all of the stories. Everdream Valley is going to go in the C tier as well. I think for me, this is a B tier farming sim, but just the way this looks and runs on the Switch, even after the update, just isn't enough for me to put it there. I love the focus on animals versus crops in Everdream Valley, and the fact that you'd run off and do different farming related quests without kind of being bogged down with the classic farming sim daily routine. I also adored how open world the map is, but I do think this is where a lot of the issues of the game has stemmed from. Overall, a lot of fun. You do play as a kid though, so there's no like relationship mechanics or anything like that in the game, but I do enjoy the interactions you have with your grandparents. It is super wholesome. Next, we have Good Pizza, Great Pizza, which I think I'm going to put in the B tier. However, I will say on the iPad, it is an A tier game. Because to me, the best way to play this is undocking the Switch and playing in handheld using the touchscreen. There's really not many touchscreen games on the Switch. But having the addition on the iPad of a bigger screen and also the Apple Pencil makes things even better. As I said before, I love restaurant-style games, and this is great as it does give you a bit of a time pinch, but it doesn't make you overall all that stressed out. I also love the fact that you have to sometimes figure out what your customers want, and you can either decide to ask them a question to clarify, which gets them a little bit annoyed, but you know for sure what they want, or you make an educated guess and hope what you gave them is right. Then we have Sea of Stars. I spoke about this in the last video. It's an S tier game. I could not tell you a better RPG at this point. It's one of the best games I've played this year so far. Everything about it is just perfect. And for me, the thing I love the most is that they let you tailor the combat to whatever level you want to be. I am personally of the opinion that I think more games need to do this, because there being an easier mode to a game doesn't detract from your personal experience if you choose not to use it. I think it can only make things better, especially when games come with incredible stories. Because I always think if your game has a fantastic story, let people enjoy it however they want to, be it with hard combat, not so hard combat, or extra hard combat. I love the fact that so much of this game revolves around the friendships between your party members. The combat, although it's a turn-based RPG, is different from everything I've played before in a great way. It was one of those games where I really struggled to put it down. I love it to pieces. Cannot recommend it enough. Another A tier game is going to be Cassette Beasts. If you don't know, Cassette Beasts had an update, I think it was a month or two ago, that completely fixed it. Previously, it ran terribly on the Switch, but all those frame rate issues have more or less gone now. And to me, this is so much of what Pokemon needs to be, because this is another monster catching game with turn-based battle mechanics, but alongside the classic Pokemon-like mechanics, there's also a fantastic story where your character actually matters. Unlike Pokemon, where sometimes I feel like you're just along for the ride. The story itself is based around you kind of winding up on this random island with no idea how you got there and with no idea how to get back home. And the crazy part is everyone else on that island has gone through similar experiences to you, just at different moments in time. Not only is there the main story, there's also side quests you can go on, so there's always plenty to do. And I love the way the battle mechanics revolve around a cassette tape. It's really cool, so unique. Definitely recommend it. Palia is also going in the A tier. Now, I know this game is technically not out on the Switch yet. I just wanted to mention it as I have a disgusting amount of hours in it. And the nice thing is, right now, I feel like, you know, the game hasn't got all that much content, but they are coming out with multiple rather large updates every single month. They just finished up on their first in-game event, which was genuinely incredible. And the really cool thing is, when the event first launched, it had some issues. It was enjoyable, but there were a few glaring problems that came with playing with other people. And within, I think it was less than 2 weeks, they had come along and fixed all of them, so the event was miles better. The only thing I'm hesitant about on the Switch is not necessarily performance, because I think that can be done right. I think it's the updates. Every single time we talk about indie games, the updates for the Switch seem to be very far behind. And that's because Nintendo have to approve every single update that goes through the eShop. And my worry is, with Palia doing multiple updates a month, with in-between patch fixes as well, is if the Switch is going to be lagging behind the PC at all, or how they're going to manage that with Nintendo doing what Nintendo does. Either way, it's going to be a matter of months before we find it out. Fingers crossed it is good. Next, we have Storyteller. Now, I have covered this before. However, it's definitely being upgraded from its previous score to an A tier. That's because they recently gave us a free update. If you don't know, Storyteller is such a unique puzzle game that is genuinely so much fun. Basically, it plays like a book. Each book has a title at the top, and piece by piece, you need to tell the story of the title. You do this by placing characters in different locations and seeing how it pans out. The cool part is sometimes levels will have an alternative way to tell each story, which it will encourage you to try and do. And overall, this has been one of my favorite puzzle games of the year. My only previous issue was for the price. There weren't that many levels. However, with the addition of all these new levels, the voice acting that they incorporated in it, the new character which allows you to go and play previous levels as well, this game has become much better value for money. I believe it's also now available on mobile phone as well, which I think is great. So I definitely recommend it in its current state. Fire Emblem Engage, I think I'm going to put in B tier. It's not that it's not a good game, I just feel like it's lacking a lot of what made Fire Emblem Three Houses an S tier for me, and I just couldn't get into it the same way I did with that. That being said, I think this had a really unique factor to it, in which the main character that you play as is not perfect, and in fact she's often played with a ton of self-doubt that really impacts how she goes along with the story. And I really like this idea that the Chosen One doesn't feel like the Chosen One, or doesn't want that title or feel like they deserve that title. And that really shook up the story in a really nice way. I think my main issue with this though is I just didn't feel connected to a lot of the characters we came in contact with. I think they gave us far too many characters to engage with, and I kind of ended up picking my favorites and then completely ignoring a huge array of characters because I just couldn't get into it with them. I will say though, this game is graphically stunning. I love the voice acting, the cutscenes, everything like that. I just wish we could influence them a little bit more. Finishing us off is Dordogne, which is gonna go in B tier, mainly because this was a fantastic game. I loved the story. The story itself was really moving, with it focused on your relationship with your family members, told by you transitioning between present and the past to relive previous memories and kind of figure out how you became estranged from your grandmother. The thing that let this down though is just how short the game is. It was 4 hours long and I wish I had more. I also kind of wish that although I enjoyed the journal aspect of the game, that it allowed us to be a little bit more free with how we did the journal. But I did really enjoy the idea. Like, for example, you could take photos in the game and then put those photos in your journal. So it became a little log about how you personally played the game. The art style as well was absolutely stunning. So much to love about it. I just needed more. That's more or less every game I've played so far in 2023. I think I was missing some, but we'll save those for the end of year roundup. And if you want to see me rank every single farming sim I have ever played, click this video here.